Welcome San Diego Rotary Club 33 members, our honored guests, and those watching on Zoom to the 33rd oldest, the 10th largest, and the first best Rotary Club in the world. So right now, I'm just so thrilled to introduce our chair of the day, who became San Diego Rotary Club's only woman to follow another woman president when she succeeded Debbie Day. That will happen again when Mia Herensky is sworn in next year and will be followed by Wendy Urashima Khan. So there's only been one time where we've had back-to-back women presidents in this club. In October of 1987, Jerry Warnke was introduced to Club 33 as a new member. She previously was called a Rotary Ann, a term that was used at that time to give a description of the spouse of a Rotary male member. It was a momentous time in our club history as then President Pat Crowell introduced Jerry. Wives of Rotarians around the world originally and sometimes still were called Rotary Anns, but with the spread of feminism and an increasing negative attitude against the all-male movement, Rotary Ann became a demeaning term and quickly disappeared. In honor of Pat Crowell, who we all know is in assisted living right now, his wife Maggie is here with us today. Maggie, please stand and be recognized. Yes. Absolutely. So Maggie, we appreciate you keeping us updated on Pat's status, and he's actually, I talked to him on the way down here and he sounded great. So Maggie, we appreciate you being here. Jerry was a recent widow after the tragic and sudden death of her husband, Dr. Paul Broadley. Their last night together was photographed at the 75th Club 33 anniversary formal celebratory dinner dance at the Sheraton Harbor Island. This is where Jerry was introduced 1 year later. Her involvement in San Diego community activities broadened over the years as she chaired the board of directors at the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center and was chair of the La Jolla Playhouse. She was head of the Playhouse Capital Campaign there, raising $42 million to build out the theater district. But her love and respect for Club 33 was a central aspect of her community service. For the past 36 years, she has served on nearly every committee in the club, with an emphasis on fundraising for projects like the Mercy Outreach Surgical Team. And now, she is the last remaining member of our club's first class with women in 1987, thanks to Dr. Sylvia Whitlock. Please welcome our chair of the day, Jerry Warnke.
Good afternoon, Club 33. We have lots of guests with us today. Everyone who is visiting, would you please stand up and let us honor your being here? Thank you. I think it's really clear that our speaker today is what drew many of us here as we celebrate, actually, now 36 years of Rotary being legal with women in it. In 1978, the Rotary Club of Duarte, California, filed suit in California against Rotary International after their club charter was revoked. They had violated the Rotary International policy, which was don't admit women. So the allegation by the Duarte Club was that Rotary was a business entity and banning members based on their gender, religion, race, ethnic origins was obviously illegal. They won, but not so fast. Rotary International then appealed to the United States Supreme Court. And on May 4th, 1987, the High Court confirmed California's decision. Women could not be excluded any longer. This was a historic day, yes. Not only did it broaden the Rotary world, but it brought in the other half of the population of the world. I think that was a good thing. So in 1987, an enormous upheaval occurred in all Rotary clubs in the United States. Women would legally be allowed, and the Duarte Club was already ready. Their club had already had women for 10 years. Think of that. They were ready. And so their first woman president was in 1987, right on the heels of the Supreme Court ruling that gave them back their charter. But more about this early pioneer's life. Sylvia was born in New York City. She was raised in Jamaica. She went to college at Cal Poly. She earned a master's degree there in education, later a PhD from Claremont. After many, many years of working at diverse educational careers, including at the UN, to a position of school principal in Duarte, she returned to college and gained another master's degree, this time in marriage and family counseling. She has worn many, many hats, but perhaps none as inspiring as being a Rotarian, who happens to be a very dynamic woman. She has been an inspiration to many around the globe, and Sylvia has orchestrated many ways to encourage both men and women to reach out in their communities to find where help is needed. And it's everywhere. Look to the right, look to the left, there's need everywhere. She has changed countless lives for the better, and Sylvia has made it her life's work to commit by words and actions the very integral mission of Rotary since it was established in November of 1911. We owe those men a great deal of gratitude for what was done at that time, even though it took them a little longer to get around to including us. This has made the world a better place, regardless of gender, religion, or race. And thankfully, Sylvia was at a place in time that challenged inequality. Please help me welcome Dr. Sylvia Whitlock.
Thank you, thank you for asking me to come here today and to talk to you again. I thought I would talk to you about what I like to call the edge of tomorrow. So, where does this whole story start? I keep thinking, because I've been telling this story for such a long time, that I'm telling people who have heard this story before, over and over again. But there are always people in the audience who have never heard the story, who don't know what it's all about. And it's been my pleasure, really, to be able to tell those people what really happened and why we have women in Rotary today. You know, women, we talk about DEI and what Rotary does with diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first diversity that Rotary ever had to deal with was women in Rotary. It was all men, no women. So where did it start? Well, many, many years ago, I went to work in a little school district in Duarte. Duarte is, how many know where Duarte is? Some people. Duarte is about maybe 15 miles east of Pasadena. And everybody knows where Pasadena is because that's where the Rose Parade comes from. And if you're not into the Rose Parade, maybe you're into Rose Bowl football. But Pasadena, Duarte was close to Pasadena. Well, in this little town, there was a small Rotary Club that was being run by the superintendent of schools. I went to work in Duarte as a school principal. And as principals usually do, you want to find out what your community is like. So you make an appointment to see the superintendent to ask him about the community so you'll know what the kids need. So I made an appointment and I went and saw Dr. Key to ask him about the community. And the first thing he said to me was, You don't need to worry about this community because we have a Rotary Club here. So what is Rotary? I had never heard of Rotary. It was 1976. And in fact, there are probably people around today who never heard of Rotary. Well, I had not heard of Rotary. And I like to tell people this story. I knew about Elks because, I worked in New York City. I worked for United Nations down 42nd Street, and Elks are always up and down the street. Their big, beautiful hats and other costumes. And you say, who are those? And somebody says, they're Elks. Okay, so they're Elks. And I knew about Lions because I was a school principal, and they provide glasses for the kids in school. I was in school for a long time. And I knew about Kiwanis. You know what Kiwanis means? It means waiting to get into Rotary. Well, I didn't make that up. Somebody who was in Kiwanis told me that. But I didn't know anything about Rotary. And, it wasn't an uncommon occurrence. So in this bedroom community was Duarte, was this small club, Rotary Club, struggling to raise membership. The president of the club was Richard Key, who was the superintendent of schools. The other big business in that community was the City of Hope Cancer Hospital. Okay, and for a long time, the Rotary Club met at the City of Hope Hospital. So Richard Key is the person who really deserves all the attention. And my book, and I have some books there today, my book was dedicated to Richard Key because he was the person whose idea it was to invite women to Rotary. And he didn't take it on as a job to invite women. He said, we have the small club, and we have work that needs to be done, and we have a lot of women in this community who can do this work. So I think I'll invite some of them to join. And somebody said to him, but Richard, they don't have any women in Rotary. So he went to the district governor and he said, we need people to work and we have women who can do this. Why can't I invite them? And he laid out his story. And the district governor said, I think you have a good story there. Go ahead and invite them, but I tell you what you do. We don't have a woman in the Rotary. We don't have any women members in Rotary. So when you register them, don't look at the four-way test. When you register them, just send in their initials, like M. Elliott could be Michael Elliott, and she was the first woman invited. She was a school principal. M. Elliott could be Michael Elliott. S. Whitlock could be Sidney Whitlock or anything. We'll just send in their initials. Well, that was designed to deceive, wasn't it? And they weren't paying attention to the four-way test. But Dick said, okay, we'll do just that. So he invited the women, and he registered them with their initials. And of course, it went through swimmingly. But then the district was celebrating its 25th anniversary. And what happens when you celebrate an anniversary? Rotary sends all kinds of people to come and help you celebrate, right? So they came to Duarte to help the club to celebrate. And during the evening, some part of the evening, the women members were introduced. And the people from Evanston were stunned. How women? We don't have women in Rotary. What is this? And somebody said, well, this club has women. Well, they didn't like the idea. They were undone. So they went back to Evanston and they said, there's this little renegade club in Duarte, little know-nothing club. And they're inviting women to join the club. And it didn't take a minute. You know how it takes the mail 3 days to go across town? Then it took about 20 minutes. We got a letter from Evanston that said 3 things. There are no women in Rotary. You need to ask the women to leave. If they don't leave, you need to stop calling yourself a Rotary Club. Well, they kind of looked around at each other, and they thought, hey, we have 3 women in here and they're doing all the work in the club. What do we mean ask them to leave? They decided they wouldn't ask them to leave, that they would appeal to their board of directors. So they sent in an appeal, and they were told immediately, you're not a real Rotary Club, and only real Rotary Clubs can appeal to the board of directors, so you can't. So they thought, okay, we'll appeal to the Council on Legislation. Anybody can talk to them. So they sent in an appeal to the Council on Legislation. And of course, that came up. But when it was presented to the Council on Legislation, it wasn't, should the women be members of the club? It was, did they violate the Rotary bylaws when they invited those women? And if any of you have ever attended COL things, you know how they go. And of course, they had violated it, and it was gone. But that wasn't the first time that the issue of women in Rotary had come up at COL. It had come up when the COL met in Detroit sometime. But of course, they just kind of looked at it and they laughed and they poo-pooed it and they shoved it off, and off it went. So that was gone too. Well, the people in the Duarte Club were okay, except for one man who didn't like the idea. He said, I can predict the death of this club if you keep these women in it. And he was able to do that because he was the undertaker in the company. Well, the woman, and he left, he resigned from the club. But the women entered wholeheartedly into the spirit and the work of Rotary. And, they did everything they should do. When the vote went to the COL, the result was 1,000 to 34 against having that, that resulted in women not being allowed to join. And I met one of those delegates who were voting when I was going to Canada once to a conference. And you know how you like to read everybody's name tag? And they were reading my name tag, and it said Duarte. I was on a train going into Convention Center in Calgary. And the gentleman said, are you from the club that invited women into Rotary? And I smiled this big smile, yeah. And he said, I was at the Council on Legislation, and I voted to have women in Rotary. He was one of those 34. He said, because I always thought they should be there. And his wife, who was sitting next to him, said, I didn't think so then, and I don't think so now. And I thought, is it something I did or said, or is it the way I look? Well, anyhow, we went past that. The first Rotary Constitution didn't say anything about not having women in Rotary. The only thing it said was, it didn't specify that Rotarians had to be men. It just said persons of good character. And that was a time when there were few women in the workaday world, so that was not, a biggie. They were not engaged in fellowship and business activities. But eventually, the bylaws evolved into men of good character. And I always wondered what Paul Harris thought about it. I never had a chance to ask him. You go to that Paul Harris exhibit in Evanston, and there's a life-size picture of Paul Harris. And I was in there, and I said, what would you have done if somebody had asked you about women in Rotary? He didn't say a word. So, well. Anyhow, Rotary, in short order, after all this happened, decided that we didn't remove the women, they were going to remove us. And so they came to Duarte and took the charter of the club away. And we were a club without a charter. But I remember Bill Brooks, who was one of our members at the time, said, well, they also said we can't call ourselves a Rotary Club. I tell you what we'll do. We'll put a big X over the Rotary symbol, and we'll call ourselves the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. Well, you want to know something? To make this story go, we were the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte for 11 years. 11 years. A Rotarian from a neighboring club, he actually was from the Arcadia Club, said, you know what? I think we can take this stuff to the courts. And so they filed notice that they were going to sue to get women admitted to Rotary. But as they prepared really to take it to California courts, Rotary petitioned that the case be heard in federal court. And the reason was because, as it said, not all members of the board of directors are Californians. But you see, there had been a precedent in federal court where a New York club had been seeking exclusionary rights for private club membership, and the federal court ruled, therefore, because the case was, the verdict was friendly to the New York court, they ruled that the case be heard in a California court. So it was first heard by the California Superior Court, which said the Rotary is right, they can expel the club if they want. And so, reluctant to drop the issue, and thinking, all this time we're thinking, oh, this is going to be a shoo-in. This is not going to be a problem. Who's going to say no to women working in a service club? After all, women also serve, but, well, they appealed. They appealed to the California Appellate Court. And by that time, there were other people who were interested in what was going on, like the ACLU. And so they joined with the Duarte Club in the appeal. And so the attorneys, who was Sanford Smith, a Rotarian from Arcadia, did his research and found out that in California there was a law called the Unruh Act, similar laws in many places, that prevented discrimination in public accommodations, and Rotary was considered a public accommodation. At that time, most of the Rotarians, 80% of the Rotarians, had their dues paid by their employers. So it was a public accommodation. So he appealed to the California Appellate Court, and the Superior Court's ruling was reversed. So Rotary International immediately appealed to the California Superior Court, the California Supreme Court, but that court refused to hear the case, which essentially affirmed the decision of the appellate court. Every time I drive by the appellate court in Pasadena, if you guys ever go to Pasadena and drive by the appellate court, wave at it. They were a friendly court. Okay. So the decision then was incumbent really only on California clubs, because this was the California Appellate Court. However, before women came into Rotary, things changed very slowly, and so here I was coming in as a president, and so I was invited to attend PETS. Our presidents go to PETS. I was invited to attend PETS. And in the postcard, why should they buy new stationery because there's one woman hanging out someplace? The stationery I got, the postcard I got said, be sure you bring your coat and tie because directory pictures will be taken. So I took my coat and tie. And the nicest thing about that meeting, there were 290 men there, one woman. They didn't even have a woman speaker. Nothing. But you know what the nicest thing about that was? When it was time for restroom breaks, I never get to tell that story. You guys are way ahead of me. Everybody knows what I'm going to say. So I'd go in the restroom and I'd come out and I'd look at the long line outside the men's restroom and I'd say, you guys can go in here now. There's nobody else going in there. So, well, anyway. Anyhow, at the section on Rotary International, that's when our incoming governor discussed the case and called us, our little club that 15 members, and this is what they're doing, you know. And he said, hey, it's just a case of the mouse that roared. So I'm sitting there taking furious notes, and I went back to Duarte, and we had a mouse pin made with a little Rotary icon on his back. And we also had a new banner that said, ex-Rotary Club of Duarte, the mouse that roared. And we had that for a long time. Well, before he was done, he said, we're going to appeal this case to the United States Supreme Court. And all the years I spent trying to be a smart Rotarian, a bright Rotarian, it never occurred to me that there was a good case to appeal to the US Supreme Court, because it was a civil rights issue. I thought the Supreme Court is never going to hear this case. Who will want to hear about inviting women to join a service club? Well, they did appeal, and I think all of you know what the outcome was. In 1987, the 5th of May, 1987, the Supreme Court did rule that women should be included in service clubs. And one of the things they said was, in fact, the rather pointed paragraph they wrote was, and it was written by Justice Powell, he said, many of Rotary's activities, including their meetings, are conducted in the presence of strangers. And because women members would not prevent the club from carrying out its purposes, there is no violation of associational rights. That's what they were appealing on. Furthermore, he said, even if there were a slight encroachment on the rights of Rotarians to associate, that minimal infringement would be justified since it serves the state's compelling interest in ending sexual discrimination, gender discrimination. And there it was. And now the decision was incumbent on all USA clubs. So this is where it really got kind of funny. I was trying to tell Paul about that today. I was driving to my job as principal of the elementary school when the news came over in the morning. It was in the morning, and it was about 7:30, and the news, it was announced on the East Coast. And so West Coast area, you know, it's been there 3 hours already. By the time I arrived at the school, some 20 minutes later, I think all the media in the world were on my doorstep. Mary Lou Elliott, who was the first woman invited, and I were interviewed by CBS newscaster Warren Olney. He interviews now, I think, for NPR or some of those places. And he wanted to interview, he was the one who was appointed to interview for the networks. And so Dr. Key, the superintendent, said, you need to leave school, we need to have classes. And the kids are wondering, what happened here? What are all the cameras doing here? It was just too much excitement, and they didn't understand that whole thing. And so we went to the district office, and we sat in the boardroom while Warren asked for some 3-4 hours, asked a bunch of questions. And I thought the questions were directed at me because I was the incoming president of the Duarte Club. And I thought I gave intelligent answers to his questions. But near the end of the interview, in fact, we were already on our feet because we thought it was almost over, he said, Sylvia, how did you get selected to be president? Well, that's a question you don't ask Rotarians, right? Because they have this stupid answer. What do you say? Oh, I don't know. I must have missed the meeting. And here I was with all these cameras in my face saying, I don't know. I must have missed the meeting. Well, what do you think happened? Well, we go home that night. The story is on the top of the news. It's the first thing on the news. They have 4 hours of film, of video, or whatever you call it. What do you think they play? Oh, I don't know. I must have missed a meeting. And here's the whole world looking around saying, for 11 years we waited to hear this? Well, I had to learn then that I was going to have to adopt a more serious mode. I couldn't do that because cameras in your face, straighten up. Well, back at the club, we had to move on meeting because we couldn't accommodate all the people who wanted to come, and there was so much that went on after this. This is my year as incoming president, and I had to settle into the goals, and one of which was Polio Plus. It was the beginning of it. The whole world was watching. You know, we had some interesting telephone calls, including one that asked if the food were any better, since there were women in Rotary. I explained we weren't in the kitchen. We weren't cooking it. It's the same thing. Well, some of the questions were a lot less pleasant. I won't go into them now. We didn't get a welcome back from Rotary International. In fact, it took them a long time to send one. But we did get a new dues schedule, so we knew that they knew. And of course, in 1989, this was 1987, 1989, the Council on Legislation voted to accept women in Rotary after Frank Devlin, some of you remember Frank Devlin, made an impassioned plea to the council. But this is 1987, 1989, Council on Legislation. It wasn't until 2004, April 2004, that the Rotarian magazine, printed several articles about women in Rotary, never acknowledged it. And then, guess where I was? I was the centerfold. But guess what? I was fully clothed, including the black turtleneck I was asked to wear when the person came to take pictures. Well, Rotary has removed the last vestiges of sexist language so that now they profit most who serve the best. And even more, a new club may not be chartered unless its membership is open, the operative word is open, to both men and women. This didn't start as a woman's issue, it wasn't at all, but as a simple attempt to recruit more members into Rotary. And how successful has that been? Can men and women work together in Rotary? They have. About 30% of the members in the US are women, little less than that around the world. So there's still a lot of room for growth. So that was the beginning. And the rest of it is available to you online and everywhere else. So if anybody has any question they must get an answer to, I'll try and answer it.
I'd like to invite Chida Warren Darby, Director of the Office of Boards and Commissions, with a special message from the City of San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. Please welcome Chida Warren Darby.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ms. Whitlock, we are so honored that you were able to share your story today. The world's a better place because you're in it. On behalf of Mayor Todd Gloria, we'd like to proclaim today Dr. Sylvia Whitlock Day. So I'll read a few of the whereases for you, not all of them. But it says, whereas Dr. Sylvia Whitlock is an American humanitarian and made history as the first woman to serve as president of a Rotary Club, and whereas Dr. Sylvia Whitlock was born in New York, where she earned a BA in psychology from Hunter College and worked for the United Nations as a statistical clerk, and I'm gonna scroll down to the bottom, whereas the City of San Diego is committed to recognizing and honoring individuals that are dedicated to the highest ideals of public service. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Todd Gloria, the 37th Mayor of the City of San Diego, for and on behalf of the people of San Diego, do hereby proclaim December 14th, 2023 to be Dr. Sylvia Whitlock Day in the City of San Diego.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good. Step up in there. Okay. And before you sit down, Dr. Whitlock, we know that you're well aware that Gordon McAnally's Rotary International presidential theme is Create Hope in the World. And may this coin serve as a reminder of the hope for Rotary you shared with us today that began your journey long before 1987. We love you, we appreciate you, we thank you for being here. Also, my gift to you will be bringing student self-leadership in your name to the high school or high schools of your choice, from Jamaica to New York to wherever you went to high school. We want to do that for you. So thank you for your life of doing good service before self and everything that you say, think, and do with your head, your heart, your hands, and your habits. We love you for it. And once again, congratulations on Dr. Sylvia Whitlock Day. Yes, yes. When Dr. Whitlock agreed to speak today, I immediately invited Rotarian Diane Crawford of the Rotary Club of Southeast San Diego to give today's 30-second parting message and then ring the bell to adjourn the 22nd meeting of our 113th year. Since joining Rotary in 1998, Diane has served in every role imaginable for her club that has earned Rotary International's distinguished presidential citation for the past 14 consecutive years. With only 20 members, it is known as the small club doing big things. But here's something big. Diane has been selected to serve as the 68th governor of our District 5340 next year, when she will become the first Black person to serve in that role. Please welcome Diane Crawford.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's a great day to be a Rotarian. This club, the San Diego Club, has a long and rich history of giving, of service, and of leadership. Imagine over the last 113 years how many lives you have touched, how many people you have touched. Thousands, tens of thousands? Absolutely. Hundreds of thousands? Definitely. A million? For sure. Could it be millions with an S? Very likely. That's incredible. Just think about that. So my question to the people in this room today, have we seen your best, or is your best yet to come? Challenge you.